Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namne Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisheshwarivadi Paschatyadesh Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. What does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita 9.29? We'll chant together. Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. Krishna says, I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. Now, before we go ahead, I have a question for you. Is that an encouraging statement or a slightly deflating statement? Like, really? Why am I worshipping Krishna if he's equal to all? Whether I worship him or not, he's going to be equal to me. There's lots of pundits here. Thank you. Yep. The next line gives away Harinamanand knows everything. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I'm also a friend to him. This is what Krishna says. Srila Prabhupada has a beautiful purport. And I don't have all the words. There's couple of sentences I took out. But one may question here that if Krishna is equal to everyone and no one is his special friend, then why does he take a special interest in the devotees who are always engaged in his transcendental service? But this is not discrimination. It is natural. Any man or woman in this material world may be very charitably disposed, yet they have a special interest in their own children. Yeah, you can be very charitable towards everyone and be serving everyone, but your own child is your own child. Yeah, the Lord claims that every living entity in whatever form is his son or daughter. And so he provides everyone with a generous supply of the necessities of life. He's just like a cloud which pours rain all over, regardless of whether it falls in rock or land or water. But for his devotees, Krishna gives specific attention. There's a favorite verse of mine in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 2, verse number 10. If anyone wants to make a mental note of it or write it down. Adi Leela, chapter 2, verse number 10. There's a long purport in that particular verse or to that particular verse from Srila Prabhupada. And there's a paragraph in there that I always remember every time I feel I'm in difficulty because it gives me so much hope and so much solace. In that, Prabhupada says that just like the king takes care only of his own children in a direct way, but leaves the welfare of the citizens in general to the administrative machinery of the state. In the same way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead takes personal care of his devotees, but leaves his energies to take care of everyone else. Isn't that a great hope giving statement? That's fantastic. Every time I think of it, I'm like, and remember, Prabhupada, every word that Srila Prabhupada wrote, unlike some of us who may not think through or we may not be divinely guided like Srila Prabhupada was and is, right? We may sometimes write words we don't always mean, but every word that Prabhupada wrote was measured. In other words, he didn't write something randomly that, oh, maybe it slipped out or something. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada says that every devotee, he didn't say every pure devotee, every devotee is under the care of the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally. So that gives us so much solace because we know that everything that happens in our life is actually directly being orchestrated by Krishna. Because, yes, we are not advanced devotees, at least I'm definitely not. 100% far away from being a pure devotee, but there is hope because I definitely identify as a devotee, not as a demon, not as someone who is inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, Krishna's assurance and Srila Prabhupada's assurance is that Krishna takes personal care of our lives and everything that happens in it. And therefore, our only duty is simply to serve with love, to try to develop that love, right? And this is very analogous to what Srila Prabhupada is writing in 9.29, and Krishna is saying directly also. Such devotees, that is, devotees who are absorbed in Krishna consciousness, are mentioned here. They're always in Krishna consciousness, and therefore they're always transcendently situated in Krishna. The very phrase Krishna consciousness suggests that those who are in such consciousness are living transcendentalists situated in Him. The Lord says here distinctly, Maite, they are in me. Naturally, as a result, the Lord is also in them. This is reciprocal. Now we know from Gita which verse talks about reciprocity. Thank you. There's a lot of pundits here. Krishna's promise of reciprocity, ye yatham am prapadyante tam stathaiva bhajamyam. Right? Krishna says in the 4th chapter, 11th verse, I reciprocate with every living entity as they approach me. And so it is up to us. We have been given that limited free will how we want to approach Krishna. Whether we want to approach for some material gain for ourselves, which is fine because that's still better than not approaching him. It's still better than not, or it's still better than approaching a demigod, right? Or someone lower than Krishna for benefits. We approach Krishna for everything. But higher than that would be to approach him because you are in some stage of transcendence or want to be transcendent. And the highest is, Krishna, I want to really get to love you, and that's why I'm approaching you. I may not be there yet, but I want to love you. And Krishna says the process of bhakti is so powerful and so hope giving that simply aspiring to love Krishna is as good as loving Krishna. And all the benefits that come from that, Krishna reciprocates. Because if we have in our heart that Krishna, I don't yet have full love for you or even proper love for you, but I want to love you, Krishna reciprocates with that desire. And everything, remember that previous Adilila verse that I mentioned, right? Everything in our life is orchestrated so that that particular event or that particular situation is facilitated, that we want to love Krishna. So Krishna says he's Suridam Sarvabhutanam, everyone's best friend. Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. Right? Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantin Richati. He says three things, right? Everyone who is in consciousness in that verse in 529, that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, he's the supreme beneficiary of all sacrifices. He's the Lord and Master of all living entities, including the demigods, right? And that He is everyone's best friend and well wishing benefactor, right? To that person achieves everlasting peace. That's what this is the peace formula, right? In 529. Now, at the moment, we might feel that this relationship with Krishna that we want to have or we have is perhaps not very strong, or we might not even want that relationship very strongly. But we do want to build it, yes? Show of hands, anyone who does not want to build a relationship with Krishna, right? We want to build that relationship with Krishna. What do we do when we are building a relationship with someone who matters to us, right? We find out from them what they like and we try to do it, right? I'll give you a very mundane example. Many people here probably work in the outside world. Yeah. Say you have a new boss, right? That has now become your boss, or you become a new boss, right? And you have a boss too. Um, what's the first thing you try to find out? You try to find out their likes and dislikes. Yeah. Like, do they like getting a PowerPoint deck? Do they like getting an Excel spreadsheet? Do they like a verbal phone call? Do they like a quick email? Right? Do they like text messages? Do we not try to find that out? Right? So, on a mundane level, that's what we do. This is the Supreme Person, Krishna, we're talking about. And we want to build a relationship. And Krishna is assuring us that you simply turn to me with love, I'll reciprocate with you. But to do that, it's not like we'll just sit back and say, okay, Krishna, I want to love you. It's a very passive, you know, feeling that I have that I really want to love you, but I'm not really going to do anything for that. Like, I'm just going to chill out, sit back on my recliner, have nice prasad, take a nap, right? And I really won't do any service. How how quickly will we advance in that relationship, do you think? Yeah, not very quickly. Krishna will still give us some credit for having that feeling, but it's entirely up to us at what speed and into what depth our relationship with Krishna goes. Because Krishna, there's another place where Prabhupada said in that earlier purport, the 929 that I talked about, that Krishna, he takes 100 steps towards us when we take one step towards him, right? So it's a pretty, I'm a finance guy. That's 1,000% rate of return, right? It's unbeatable. You can't get 1,000% rate of return anywhere unless you're running a Ponzi scheme, and then you'll go to jail sometime. So, but this is not a Ponzi scheme. Krishna is not taking from these people and then giving it to these people and then taking more and then building it on, right? Krishna genuinely is anxious for us to reciprocate with him in love. And when we take just one, two, three, 5 steps towards him, he takes 100-fold steps towards us. And we feel that, it's an experiential process. It's not a process that, you should just take my word for it. I'm trying to repeat whatever Prabhupada said, or even Prabhupada's word for it. Experience it for yourself. You'll see it, right? So we said that we should find out from Krishna what he would like, right? So that we can develop a strong relationship with him. And so Krishna tells us there's the yoga ladder. He starts with the highest process, and then he says, but if you can't do that, then I'll give you a lower process, an easier process. But if you can't do that, then I'll give you another process, right? So the yoga ladder starts with Krishna saying, fix your mind upon me, engage all your intelligence in me, and remember me, right? Remember me at all times. So Krishna starts with that as the highest form of bhakti yoga. And then he says, if you can't do that, Arjuna, follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga and simply desire to attain me, right? This is the stage that many of us are in, sadhana bhakti, where we have a desire to attain Krishna, but we also have many other things going on in our life, in our mind, right? We may not be fully there yet. Maybe some of us are less convinced, some of us are more engaged in family activities or activities that keep us away from bhakti. But Krishna is saying there are certain principles of bhakti yoga, at least follow those, and at least have that desire in your heart that you want to attain me. So that's the second step he gives. Some people may not be willing to do that also. So then he says, simply try to work for me, right? Whatever you do it as an offering to me. That's what Krishna says, right? So that's even easier or a lesser principle than the previous one. Then he says, some people might say, I don't know who this Krishna is, but I like the idea of like doing charity, opening hospitals, and feeding the homeless and that kind of stuff. Krishna says that's okay, no problem. Try to give up all the results of your work and offer even to a mundane cause. What's Krishna doing here? Krishna is trying to take us out of ourselves, right? Because let's face it, most of us are very full of ourselves, right? We either think that we are the best looking. I always think I have the best hair, but we that we are the most intelligent, right? Or that my life matters more than everyone else's life, right? And we're very full of ourselves, and we are absorbed. We're self-absorbed. So Krishna is starting at the highest, saying, "Fix your mind completely upon me. Engage your intelligence in me. Remember me at all times." But then he says, "Okay, I realize it may not be possible. So then do this. Then if not that, then do this, right?" And he's saying, "Okay, if you can't even work for me, Just offer up the results of your work to me. And you see that, there are people who do like good causes, and that's wonderful. They'll have a longer journey to Krishna, you know, because it's not a direct process that they're following. But even that process, Krishna sanctions and says, no problem, do that. That's part of the yoga ladder. And then he says, if you can't do any of that, cultivate knowledge. Now, what is, it's essential to clarify this. Cultivate knowledge, what we are doing right now is discussing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, right? We are cultivating knowledge. So, is that the lowest process? That's not. But what knowledge does he mean? He means knowledge of the self, the fundamental knowledge that Gita teaches that I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul, right? And that, the impersonalists, they cultivate at the most basic stage. So Krishna is saying, you can't work for me, you can't work, even give up your work offerings or results to, a mundane cause. What to speak of bhakti yoga and then fixing your mind upon me? At least cultivate knowledge. Start to realize that this body, which ages every single day that you're alive, this body is not you. The spirit soul inside, the Atma, that's the real you that's there. And that Atma has a connection to the source of that Atma, which is the super Brahman or the Param Brahman, right? That is Shri Krishna. And so he says, cultivate that knowledge and then meditate. Now, in this age of Kali, Krishna says very clearly in the sixth chapter, meditation is not the way, or Arjuna pushes back on Krishna actually, saying, right, this process you've told me it's like impossible, like sitting on a kusha grass mat and closing your eyes and then focusing your attention on the tip of your nose and like thinking of nothing except like that one mantra, the one, right? It's impossible. Arjuna says, someone like Arjuna cannot do it. Trust me, we can do it, right? It's impossible. So, and Krishna rolls it out too. But he says, okay, you can't do that. Do some meditation. Better than cultivating that fundamental knowledge, meditate. And then he says, renounce fruits of action. He brings it back to offer something to me. So he brings his, he tells us these are the steps, and it's good for us to know or introspect upon where are we in this yoga ladder, right? And it's fine being wherever we are. I mean, one of the things I've learned after 20 something years of bhakti is, Radhika and I discuss this all the time, we can't pretend. We can pretend to other people, but we can't pretend to ourselves or to Krishna where we are, right? But the essential thing is this. Yes, it's fine to think and to realize that we are not very advanced, we are fallen, but it's not okay to think that I want to remain fallen, right? So we want to go higher than where we are. And we don't have to aspire to become a pure devotee in like one shot, though that's possible. Krishna tells us it's possible, right? But we can try to advance steadily and make sure that we don't ever slide back, at least go forward. The river of life flows constantly, and it only has two directions. It doesn't have a static function. So it doesn't have a function where you can just sit where you are and nothing happens, right? You either go forward or you go backward, right? I don't know about you all. I hate going backward. So I want to go forward, right? So every day, something better than what we did yesterday, right? And we can look at these paths that Krishna tells us and say, okay, I can aspire to be a little better tomorrow than I was today. Yeah. And then Krishna spells out in that chapter the qualities of people, of devotees who are dear to him, right? And this entire thing, the last 20 minutes or so that I've been speaking, is actually an introduction for the verse that I'm about to speak on, because that verse is really, it speaks to me. It's an aspirational verse for me, and I want to really talk about the next verse that we're going to get into. So we'll chant this together. Yasmanodvijate loko lokanodvijate chaya harshamarshà bhave mukto yaha sachame priya. What is Krishna saying here? He by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equiposed in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. right? Before we get into, I highlighted that he by whom no one is put into difficulty because that's going to be the focus of the next few minutes of our discussion. Where else did we see equiposed in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety in the Gita? This is the 12th chapter, so we've already seen it somewhere. Yeah? Matra sparshasta kaunteya, right? So Krishna says, the comings and goings of happiness and distress are like the comings and goings of the season, right? They follow one another and they're temporary. So they'll you don't be disturbed by those. That's what he's saying. So he said that earlier in the second chapter, actually very much towards the beginning of his discourse, and now he's saying it in the 12th chapter in this 15th verse. Yeah. Prabhupada writes a really wonderful purport here. No one is put into difficulty, anxiety, fearfulness, or dissatisfaction by such a devotee. Since a devotee is kind to everyone, he does not act in such a way as to put others into anxiety. Yeah. Um, there's a difference between kindness and being nice. Anyone want to venture what difference or what differences that might be? Nice might be, I don't really think, Harinam Anand's Tilak is very good, but I want to curry favor with him. It actually is nice, but I'm just picking on you. um, but I want to curry favor on with you, so I like fakely or artificially say, Harinam Anand, what a beautiful tilak you're wearing. And I'm thinking, dude, you couldn't even finish it, or it's not straight, or it's crooked, or whatever, right? Um, that's niceness. It can be fake. It's not always fake, but it can be fake. Kindness is different. And kindness doesn't mean we roll over and become pushovers for anything that happens in life. Like just today, I had to say no to someone who was being overbearingly obnoxious. And I did it in a very kind way, but very directly, because I don't want to lead them down the garden path. And so to me, that kindness was don't raise their hopes, say no right now, right? Don't be passive aggressive, right? Just be direct, but in a kind way. A kind way means like empathize, realize that other people have feelings too, and speak in a way that actually appeals to their heart and doesn't, you know, crash their, sense of self-worth or, sense of belonging, right? That's kindness. So Prabhupada's saying, such a devotee is kind to everyone. He does not act in such a way as to put others into anxiety. At the same time, if others try to put a devotee into anxiety, he is not disturbed, right? Now, let's be honest. We do service together. We do put each other into anxiety. Yeah. Sometimes, there are arguments that happen. People don't show up, right? Or they show up 2 hours later, right? It's a devotee standard time. Sometimes, Prabhu, I'll be there at 10 o'clock, 12:30. Where are you? Rishikesh, I haven't, you were going to come and help me with the cooking, right? And poor Rishikesh, he's always on point. He's always on time. But anyway, um, right? This happens all the time. But what Krishna is saying is, if others put us into anxiety, we're not disturbed. How is that possible? And Krishna Prabhupada says that it's by the grace of the Lord that he's so practiced that he's not disturbed by any outward disturbance. This is the secret. Actually, because a devotee is always engrossed in Krishna consciousness and engaged in devotional service, such material circumstances cannot move him. Right? I'll give you the example. I was talking to someone who works for me in my company, and he's got two daughters, 5 and 3, and he calls them animals because they're at that age. And he's like, they were after him saying, "Dad, Dad, Dad, can we get a dog?" And he's like, "I don't need another animal in the house, right? I've got two of you. That's enough." And he was um, his he was telling me about how the little one, Charlotte, she comes in and she's the end of the world because her toy has been taken away by her older sister, right, Maddie. And you, the father or the uncle, you're looking at it and saying, "Come on, it's a little toy. I'll give you another toy," right? Similarly, Because we are so engrossed in our circumstances of life, something happens to shift what we are doing. We get totally like Charlotte or Maddie, right? We get totally overwhelmed. Oh my God, my situation is changing. Yeah, yeah. And we scream, we rant. Sometimes, we'll get angry at the instrument of the karma that's happening to us, right? But if you just elevate yourself from that or look at it from a pure devotee's perspective or Krishna's perspective, it's like that guy who works for you, right? Dan, he's looking at his daughters and saying, "Why are you so upset? It's such a little thing. I'll give you another toy, right? Don't worry about it." Or it's happening for your good because you need to go to bed. It's 8 o'clock and you're still playing with your toy, so I took it away, right? Point is, unless we have something bigger in our life, whatever happens to us, our material circumstances will always overwhelm us. Because if we don't have perspective, then every wave that hits us will rock our boat or it'll capsize it, like this, for example, right? I promise I didn't rehearse it. So to get perspective, Prabhupada is saying a devotee is always engrossed in Krishna consciousness. Not little bit, not Sunday devotees. We come a couple of hours, 3 hours, and we see the deities, we chant a little, we read or we hear a class, and then we go home. Not Sunday devotees, everyday devotees, all the time. Now, this is a common question people always ask, like, but I have so many responsibilities. How can I be engrossed? Right? Prabhupada gives us hope. At the at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the preface, he talks about how this book is meant to be read in small installments daily. And he says that by the time a reader finishes the first 9 cantos, he's sure to become a pure devotee of the Lord. Look it up in the preface. It's a very powerful preface that Prabhupada says, right? The key part is he says daily contact in small installments. Yeah, if you can do an hour, 2 hours a day, fantastic. But many of you are mothers, fathers, right? Jobs, things like that. You can't devote like 2 hours a day plus chanting time, right? To reading, but daily contact. Why? Because that daily contact refills our battery. Just like we charge our iPhone every day, right? Or our Android, if you don't have an iPhone, right? We charge our phone every day, right? We must charge our spiritual batteries every day, right? And when we do our work or when we do the rest of the day, if we do it in the spirit of Krishna, when we put down our beads in the morning, Krishna, I'm about to now log into work, or I'm about to go to work, or I'm about to, feed my baby, or whatever, the case may be, right? I'm going to do it as an offering to you. That activity stops being material and becomes spiritual. And now it's an offering to Krishna that we are doing. So our entire day we are engrossed. When Arjuna was fighting the battle of Kurukshetra, you think he was sitting there with japa beads in hand? When like fiery missiles were being fired at him, right? He had no time to even think of anything, right? He was just like boom, boom, boom. He was like arrows flying, right? It's if you read the Mahabharata, it's like a hair-raising set of descriptions, right? But because he was doing it purely as an offering to Krishna, that he was engrossed in Krishna consciousness, right? He was not engaged in some material activities. So I have some points about how we can act so we don't put others in anxiety. Anyone want to start off with a thought or two? Thank you. Keep your commitments. Brilliant. Yes. Sorry? Empathy. So put yourself in the other person's shoes. You said think before you speak. Fantastic. Sorry? Be kind. Thank you. Did my presentation leak out or something? Because all these points are in the next slide that is about to go up. So I started off by saying be self-aware. Right? Self-awareness is not a trait that is given to all of us, but it can be cultivated. Just like we can build muscles by doing gym work, we can cultivate self-awareness by introspection, by asking for feedback from trusted people, right? One or two close friends, spouse, whatever the case may be. right? People who care about us. But being self aware, like, hey, this is how I came across. And maybe what I did was not 100% right. This part I can improve next time, right? That is part of becoming the kind of devotee that is very dear to Krishna, right? Follow through on commitments. Harinamanand Prabhu said that, right? So don't be that devotee. If you promise to come for cooking or cleaning at 10 o'clock, don't show up at 12:30, right? Show up at 10 o'clock or maybe 10:30 devotee standard time, but not 12:30 or 1, right? Or call at 10:30 saying, Prabhu, I forgot about it. Or, you know, my, you know, my daughter ate the car steering wheel and I can't come, you know. So yeah, since we don't have dogs, most of us, so yeah, dog, I can't say dog ate the homework, but so yeah, don't be that person, right? Empathy. That's what Damodar said. Put yourself in other person's shoes, right? Strive to be kind always. That's what you said, right? That includes being kind to our own family. How, what a novel concept it is, right? We generally are very kind to people in the temple, to our friends, to our coworkers. Well, we'll probably get fired if you're not kind to our coworkers, but we strive to be kind to everyone else. But then when it comes to family, whether it's children who are pestering us or our spouse, right? We yell at them and we are like sometimes unkind to them. So being kind includes being kind to our family, not just to outsiders. Yeah. And in fact, if our family is Krishna conscious, as I would imagine everyone's family is here, then you're dealing with devotees. So you can't offend them by being unkind to them. Yeah. Apply the teachings of Krishna Bhakti, right? So why do we read and why do we hear classes? So that when situations come in our life, we can apply them. The teachings of Bhakti and the application is like the muscles that I talked about. Just like muscles are strengthened when we go to the gym and do push-ups, pull-ups, weight bearing exercise, application strengthens the muscles of Krishna Bhakti in our mind and our body and our soul. And above all, absorb ourselves in hearing and chanting about Krishna. I only have a slide or two and then we'll open up for discussion. Why should we hear and chant about Krishna? Actually, if you Google effect of hearing and chanting on Vedabase, you'll come up with almost 200,000 hits, right? So obviously, I don't have 200,000 references here. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu, he's on his tour of South India, and as part of that, he's saying, according to the verdict of the Shastras, this is Mahaprabhu himself, the process of hearing and chanting is the best means to attain loving service to Krishna. Parikshit Maharaj, this is the story of um, Putana. Yeah, Parikshit Maharaj is telling Shukadeva Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj, my dear king, wherever people in any position perform their occupational duties of devotional service by chanting and hearing, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, there cannot be any danger from bad elements. And lastly, this is Krishna telling the wives of the Brahmanas, right, who had come to see him and they didn't want to go back home. He tells them, it is by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating upon me, that is remembering me, and chanting my names and glories that love for me develops. Yeah. So there's, like I said, there's another 199,997 references that are there about hearing and chanting. But I wanted to pick some to remind ourselves, why do we hear and chant about Krishna and how do we get absorbed? And I'm a corporate guy, finance guy. I like to always think in terms of investment. What do I get in return, right? So the result of hearing and chanting about Krishna is the development of love for Krishna, by which all good qualities develop in us, right? It's not that we have to artificially try for those qualities that are described in 12th chapter. We should try to be kind even when we are not yet on the level of always being kind, right? We should try not to put others into anxiety, right? As per what Prabhupada, Krishna said in 12:15. But The qualities that are described in that chapter will automatically come to us when we are absorbed in hearing and chanting. We become dear to Krishna, who then reciprocates with our love. We achieve perfection. That's the perfection of why the human form of life, why we have this human form, and we become happy. Right? That's the result of hearing and chanting about Krishna. And to summarize, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Krishna is equal to all. That's what I started with, right? And yet he favors his devotee. He reciprocates with all as they approach him. That was Ye Tamam Prapadyante. Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, right? He's the supreme enjoyer and everyone's best friend and well wisher. He gives us different paths by which to approach him, the yoga ladder, right? Those who develop certain qualities become dear to Krishna. That's what we talked about. And simply by wanting to aspire to love him and hearing and chanting about him, we develop those qualities and become dear to Krishna. Reflections, comments, questions, corrections. Ooh.
So you're saying that as aspiring devotees, you see that everything that happens to us is being arranged by Krishna. So oftentimes, maybe all the time, what happens to me isn't what I want. And I can't even understand why it's happening to me. So my question is, Krishna's trying to teach me something. How am I to understand? How can I figure out what Krishna is trying to show me when I'm really bewildered by what's happening to me?
Thank you. I'll repeat the question for anyone online. The question is that frequently when something happens to us, we might actually be bewildered as to why it's happening to us. It seems contrary to everything that had been indicated or what's maybe right for our devotional service, but it's happening to us. So if we are bewildered, how do we then understand, right, that this is Krishna's arrangement for us?
How do we know what he wants us to do?
How do we know what he wants us to do? It's the age-old question. Actually, you know the answer, Prabhu. You're just asking it for our benefit, so that we can benefit from it. I'll try, and then you can correct me or add to it. Um, we don't always have to understand why something is happening to us. We just have to have the faith that whatever is happening to me is arranged by Krishna. I'm a devotee of Krishna. I don't count myself in the camp of demons. I count myself in the camp of devotees, right? And therefore, I have Prabhupada's assurance. Remember, Krishna says in Gita, right? He says, Arjuna, you declare that my devotee will never perish. Why does he do that? Because Krishna sometimes will break his own promise in order to protect a devotee's promise. But he will never allow a devotee's promise to go in vain. So Prabhupada is telling us in that Adi Lila verse that I mentioned, 210, right? That our lives are 100% personally directed by Krishna, right? And therefore, we don't always have to understand it. We simply have to accept it and be grateful. Sometimes reverses come, and I've experienced that myself, right? I thought I was like, this is the right thing for my devotional situation, and it doesn't happen. It's the exact opposite that happens, and it's like, Krishna, really? I wanted it to, for you, for service. But let me accept it. I don't understand it. I'm going to be grateful and go along and go with the flow, and then you'll find doors will open up. And also take guidance from friends and peers and senior devotees. And if the situation is big enough, ask them what could be the meaning of this and how do I process it. That answer your question?
Add something.
Please.
The last point you're making emphasize how important it is that you have a relationship with at least one devotee that you can open up your heart
Correct.
and say, this is why I'm pleased with your guidance.
Mhm.
The other thought that came to my mind is that even if I can't understand it, Krishna wants me to be more introspective and look at my situation more and maybe with a different pair of glasses so that my understanding can be better.
Right. Thank you. Harinam Anand Prabhu, you had your hand up.
No, I mean, just a coincidence. Today morning, I was discussing with
You want to speak up?
yeah, my son. They have Bhagavad Gita memorization verses, and we chose this verse.
Which one? 12:15?
12:15.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's coincidental. very nice, very interesting.
Thank you. Anyone? Questions, comments? Yeah, Nilamani Prabhu.
Well, just again for better understanding, in the purport that you first was reading,
Mhm.
in the statement that Krishna provides a generous amount of everything needed to all living entities.
Mhm.
Is that really true? Is that really true when you think about the world around us? Does everyone really get a generous amount of everything they need?
I think it's on the very first page, isn't it? Yeah, this one. Yeah, so the question that Nilamani Prabhu said, the last paragraph, the Lord claims that every living entity in whatever form is his son, and he provides everyone with a generous supply of the necessities of life, right? Um, my understanding is Krishna provides us what we need, not necessarily what we want.
Yes, and that's understandable, but I'm sure that we can all think of many examples where
Yeah.
people's needs are not, people or living entities' needs are not.
Not being met. Yeah, there is, it's a complex, every time I've heard or spoken about the interplay of karma and, what happens in the world, um, it's the most incredibly complex network of events. What we understand from our predecessor acharyas is that in the life of a devotee, karma, because we know that Krishna takes charge of our lives, right? Krishna can manipulate the karma for certain things to happen. He might take certain things away. He might give an overabundance of certain things to us, right? Both things can happen. But in case of the broader world, just like the king in that purport I quoted, the administrative machinery of the state takes care of the citizens, right? The administrative machinery in this case is karmic reactions. And the world is, it's Kali Yuga. The world is in a state of terrible, right, misery. But Krishna tells us in 8th chapter, right, this is the Kavayam or Shashwatam. This is not a place. Every time Radhika and I have this discussion almost every day when we're reading Shastra, like every time we feel that something is comfortable, you get at least reminders. It may not be happening to us, thank God, but we get reminders. This is not a place for us to get comfortable. This is not our home, right? We are simply meant, we are here for a reason. We are meant to develop our love for Krishna and go back. But yes, this is a place of misery and it's temporary. I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
Of course, there was a great Jewish philosopher who said the same thing,
Mm.
that this is not a real home. You may have heard of the Jewish philosopher, Christ.
Absolutely. The kingdom of God is our real place. Thank you. Shradika, you want to speak up to that? Thank you. Yeah, we're meant to discuss the Shastras, not just hear them. Someone else have a question, comment, or reflection?
कार्य कार्य करते हैं तो प्रकृति करते हैं सुख दुख का नाम पुरुष सर्वे जीवा when you feel happiness and
Hmm.
distress in our life. Yeah, he provides. But of course, he is identify future to the hope we say.
Mhm.
Hope we are supposed to be entitled for.
Yeah, yeah, and all the miseries of life, we can also meditate on Queen Kunti's prayers, where she talks about how in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 8th chapter, right? She meditates about how these difficulties that they went through, the Pandavas went through, actually they could completely go through them because they were always absorbed in hearing about Krishna and thinking about Krishna. it it's a genuine antiseptic. Krishna consciousness is an antiseptic. Doesn't mean bad things might not happen or disturbances might not happen, but how we react to it will be strengthened by our Krishna consciousness. So it's 6 o'clock. Should we? Yeah. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur
So let's thank His Grace Yashoda Dulal, Prabhu, with 3 loud Haribols. Haribol! 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 He always gives such practical, down to earth, easy to understand classes. So we're very, very grateful that he comes and spends some time with us. So thank you, Prabhu. So we will have Shayanarti at 7:15. If you're honoring Prasad in the temple room, we request you to vacate by 6:45 so we can clean up and prepare for Shayanarti. Hare Krishna.
What time is your
6 o'clock.